Hello and welcome to our weekly Integral Love Relationship Web Jam. My name is Martin Utschig and I'm the author of Integral Relationships, a Manual for Men, and my new book, Sex, Purpose, Love, Couples in Integral Relationships Creating a Better World. And the purpose of our weekly web jams is to further the integral love relationship vision. And today I'm thrilled and excited and honored to have Johnny Blackburn on our call. Hello, Johnny, and welcome.
Thanks for having me, Martin.
Yeah, and where do you join us from?
San Diego, California.
San Diego. Cool.
USA, yeah.
USA, yes. So if you join us live, we invite you to participate by typing in your name and where you call us from at the bottom of the screen. And if you are single and looking for a partner, you may also share your integralsingles.com screen name or your Facebook profile name. We also encourage you to join our conversation live by clicking on the hand symbol at the top right of the screen. And once I accept your request, a small plugin will be downloaded and the test of your camera and microphone will run before you can come online. And this works only in Google Chrome. So you may watch this on another browser, but if you want to come online, then you have to install Google Chrome. Please also know that this webcam is recorded and you give your permission to be included in the replay. Johnny Blackburn is a respected authority on human embodiment, connection, and professional performance. And that already tells, why I'm so thrilled and excited to have him on the webcam this morning, because I'm also very interested in embodiment specifically. He is a developmental coach, author, speaker, and event facilitator, specializing in helping people awaken to greater potential and living from deeper presence, connection in work, love, and life. Johnny's original background is in management consulting, and he also has a master's degree in psychology and more than 3,000 client coaching hours as a professional certified coach with the International Coach Federation, and hundreds of hours of facilitating groups with live experiential events, all combined to provide an integral approach to embodiment, there is my favorite word again, transformational experiences, another one of my favorites, and skill building for practical work, love, and life applications. Woohoo! That sounds very impressive. Of course, we know each other from before, and your friends, Jim Cruz and other people said, you have to have Johnny on the webcam, you have to invite Johnny. So I'm really glad that you made the time and share your wisdom with us today.
Excited to be here, Martin. Yeah.
So,
you said,
how did you get?
I think we're both embodiment kind of fans and geeks. And I remember I took a workshop of yours several years ago, and I really appreciated the way that you designed integral, experiential exercises to help people feel and experience the integral model in their bodies and in their lives. And I think we both appreciate the importance of realizing that the human experience is an embodiment game, and then to get creative and fun in designing experiences, books, videos that help people to kind of feel and access things and express things through their bodies. So I respect that.
Oh, thank you so much. You actually were in the workshop in Los Angeles, right? I had totally forgotten about that. That was the first integral love relationship workshop I ever did. And there's only one exercise that changed over all the years. Everything else stayed the same. And of course, I've been now in Europe, in Moscow, in Australia, all over the US facilitating these workshops. And recently in Turkey doing a 5-day training, and it's still the same thing. It works. So thank you for being the first one where we did the first one.
I'm sure we've probably both been to a lot of different workshops, and it's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I was really struck by the way you started. Because the depth and breadth of the maps that have kind of come through your work, but I really was touched and felt you in terms of the way you started and feel in your heart in terms of sharing your relationship history and the story by which you were inspired to kind of share your work. And as we kind of get into purpose through this call, I think that's one thing that's always interesting to me is like, what's the experience or process by which people kind of hear the call to a deeper life? That's a really fascinating subject to me. So I'd like to get into that later.
Yeah. So I turned it around and say, when did you feel the call, and when did you feel to do the work that you're doing now? What triggered it?
I had a profound state experience at 16, and that set me on a quest to kind of make meaning out of that. There was sort of an inner voice experience and a complete unification in just for 30 seconds, and then everything came back. And so it was so profound that I started reading the Bible and started studying other religions, like had the secret spiritual life in high school and didn't know how to integrate it at all, like very, very conventional life by sports and student by other means. And then there was asking a deeper question, like there's got to be more to life than this towards the end of college. And then a severe experience, back injury. It was overall 4 years and 2 years completely florid. And that was really the wake-up call for me.
Wow. You were 4 years, like, not able to move?
2 years. 2 years. After a failed surgery, 5 months completely on the floor, able to stand for 5 minutes at a time. So a lot of time to contemplate and
about your own life purpose and why this is happening to you, and
why is this happening to me? If I ever
not feeling as a victim.
How do I want to? I spent 3 days as a victim. Woe is me.
Yeah. Wow.
It wasn't very fun. It wasn't fun to be around myself, and the work helping me out because I really couldn't take care of myself. That wasn't so fun for them to be around either. So I contacted some part of myself that said, like, okay, I'm going to make the best of this. I'm going to trust that this is happening for a reason. And so I said, well, you know, all those times in the past where I said, oh, I'll do that when I have more time. Well, I had plenty of time. I was really physically limited, but, you know, so I started reading a bunch, started meditating. I would watch a classic movie at night and just made the best of that experience. And looking back on it now, it's it's worth kind of like for me to pause there for a moment, right? What you just said, I think, is so profound because, you know, I mean, you know, my house burned down recently, and I felt for the first time in my life how this is when something dramatic happens to you that you have no control over. And I noticed how I've slipped into this angry victim role for a while, and then, you know, coming out of it, and that you did that in 3 days is amazing. And I'm now so grateful for that experience, for the first time understanding Viktor Frankl's book, you know, Man's Search for Meaning, that I realized that I still have a choice how I respond to that traumatic experience. And that seems what had emerged for you naturally, that you made a choice how to respond to that traumatic experience, right? Well said. I remember that book as well as the movie It's a Beautiful Life being big inspirations during that period.
Yeah. Okay. I interrupted you there, and then what happened? You obviously got off the floor at one point.
Well, I kind of spent it was a process. I spent 2 years kind of, even though I was reading and learning and meditating at the beginning, it was sort of still like in the mindset of the conventional mindset of like drugs and surgeries and will make me better, and doctors will make me better. And there was a fortuitous meeting with sort of an ally who inspired me to kind of like take responsibility for my situation and started to do some alternative research. So then I spent the second 2 years of that just like a human experiment of getting into biofeedback and progressive relaxation and changing my diet and learning stretching and yoga and literally like rebuilding my body and rebuilding my emotional, like healing deeper emotions. And So there was like the first 2 years was like make the best of it and just endure. And then the second 2 years was sort of like take responsibility and kind of claim my life and, use the tools that are possible.
And then I can imagine, did you then go into psychology after that and coaching and using that experience to help other people?
After the final healing, there was like, I remember running in the park one afternoon, and it was like the most free that I've ever felt in my life, Martin. Like, because the perspective, there was possibilities at the beginning that some of my friends thought I'd never come back. And so I remember that degree of like feeling free and then I just fell to my knees, and it was just like overpouring of gratitude to life for all the learning and the healing and the experience to kind of go through that transformation. Because had I not had that experience, I would have probably been a management consultant on a very different track. So I spent 2 weeks kind of really savoring that. And I remember one evening just after meditation, just saying like, okay, life, I'm ready to help be of service. And then very soon the next kind of missions presented themselves. I got a call because I had been a consultant. So I got a call as a consultant to kind of help a family turn a facility into an integrated medical center. And then I remember I was working and it was a great job, but I would come home at night and I was just this thirst to read and learn and train. And that was way back when Integral Naked was the only podcast. And so I was just like ravenous for those. And then I was sort of ready for like, okay, I want to get some formal education on this. And I had looked around to some conventional schools and nothing was really resonating. And I remember reading a book. I was reading a book on a beach, and a woman came up to me because she saw the title. We ended up having this conversation, and synchronistically, she mentioned the psych graduate school that I ended up going to, and it was just a perfect fit. So, we can talk about this more in purpose in terms of other people, but I think there's this quality of like when we're on track, living on purpose, then even though there might be an interim lull or a transition phase, the next mission always comes. So those were my experiences. Getting the orders for the next mission.
Yeah. I think that is in the webinar title that you said, purpose is a process. So, but a question for this concludes kind of like your story, right?
Okay.
Or does it?
Sure.
Yeah. I kind of interrupted you. So do you want to add something to that?
Yeah.
The woman on the beach, and then you went to school and.
That was just like, there was the personal healing and transformation, and then like the training, like to hone the skills to be of service to others. So those were all part of that process.
Yeah. So you kind of like started to move in the direction of your purpose, right? That's how you kind of see it, right? Like more like a moving towards. Is that correct? Through that dramatic event that kind of like set you off on that path.
Right.
And so, of course, we have heard from other people like Eckhart Tolle, who was suicidal and couldn't live, when he asked the question, I can no longer live with myself, where it is awakening that there is an I and a myself and that they're not the same. Right? That's his story. And we know of many other stories of people who had traumatic events. But of course, there are other people who woke up or started on this path of living what I now call transcendental purpose. And there are many, there's like 7, 8, 10 different words, higher purpose, true purpose, God's purpose, universal purpose, unique purpose, soul's purpose. And so it's fascinating to me that different groups of people are, I can almost feel like it's a little stratified depending on what level of consciousness people are at. That people at all levels of consciousness, and probably throughout history, naturally, have felt that there is a greater, higher, deeper purpose than living what I call our biological purpose. So my question is, what in your experience, besides traumatic near-death experiences or other traumatic events, what causes people to awaken to this path, that there is something beyond just seeking the good life and somehow making it through life, and to contribute to others instead of just taking from others?
I'd like to start that with a little context, if we can. I really appreciated your distinction of kind of biological purpose and sort of like the primal human levels of that have been kind of wired in evolutionarily, and then sort of like the next tier higher purpose. And I hear you kind of articulating how different schools of thought, different teachers have like called it different things. You know, I think as we both know, at a certain level of awareness, then the level of mind is constructed. And so and yet at the same time, there's an important utility to like the shared experience of language and the way that those can provide not only connection, but through maps help to orient us to experience and really save years, decades of like by synthesizing maps. So I really appreciate the cartographers and the map makers of history, yourself and Wilbur, and those people who have tried to find the universal themes, but also remind us of the lenses of multiple intelligences and stages of development to give us a really context of like, hey, where's the objectivity and the universality of our human experience? So would you agree there?
Yes.
So
also good.
You know, I think on a personal level, there's the inclination to translate the maps and then bring those back into the trenches, because you know, I work with real people and groups, and tracking people over time has been really helpful to me to really be curious about their experience and their unique processes. And so what I find is that many of us are aware, like, yes, okay, there's a higher purpose, let's call it. And when we're really working with people, like what I've discussed from my perspective, this is a process rather than a thing. And especially for younger people, it causes a lot of anxiety when they think they're looking for a thing. And so from my perspective, like, I think the purpose is a process, which I think has several facets. I think there's an initial discovery phase. I think there's a development phase, and I think there's a delivery phase. Now, this isn't a linear process. Once these sort of start, the discovery phase continues, because along this sense of purpose, it's almost like a direction, like a through line that is strung together by these various missions. And these missions help us to learn skills and have experiences, learn life lessons, but it also cultivates some of the talents that you talk about in your book that are really like helping prepare our nervous system to be instruments of service. So if I'm looking for, now sometimes I might not be able to articulate what my deepest purpose is as I'm in the initial discovery or development phase. So this is the place where I think it causes a lot of anxiety and confusion for some people. So instead, if they orient themselves to their direction and their highest priorities in the next 6 to 12 months, which are related to like their professional development, building their skills, doing their deeper healing, doing their inner development, to learning, then that orienting principle can help them get from mission to mission, and which takes them ultimately to becoming the living embodiment of their purpose.
So I'm still, you know, when I was dating, when I usually asked women, like on Tinder, so like one of my first questions, you know, what is your life's purpose? And what do you feel, what is of ultimate concern to you, for example? What do you feel most passionate about? I would say 90% of the women either gave sort of like a biological purpose answer, right, to take care of my family, or, you know, and I'm not discounting that in any way, right? Or, you know, my purpose is just to enjoy life to the fullest. It's sort of like a standard sentence. And only about 10%, you know, could say something what I would say, right? I'm really concerned about the well-being of animals or humans or whatever, right? And they felt it felt like they had a deeper purpose, and they wanted to contribute something to make the world a better place, to create more goodness, truth, beauty,
Right.
or functionality in the world. And so I'm still curious why, beyond some traumatic experiences, what in your experiences, what can cause people to ask these questions, from the outside, maybe, I mean,
Right.
I'm sure I inspired hundreds of people just to think about that by asking the question. And why do other people just sort of like go through life without never really thinking about a higher purpose?
Well, I want to talk about this, and I'm curious just if we're on the same wavelength here. My sense is that there can be an internal or an external, like a more private, personal, kind of deeper purpose to my life, or it can have a more public face.
Okay. And the trigger can also come more from an internal place, right? Or it can come to an external event to ask these.
I mean, if we're talking about the trigger, yes. But I just want to, somebody's purpose could be to heal, like they had a very difficult childhood and relationship with their father. So let's say a man, then his purpose may be to heal his relationship with his father and be the best father he can be.
Okay.
So, I would say professionally, it might not matter so much what he does for his jobs, but, like he could, as he goes, like, let's say he's at Green, then he could also want to do something that at least is sort of positive for the environment and doesn't have a negative impact. But again, like if that person's thinking that he needs to be a big speaker on stage, like there's going to be a constant sort of like gap. So I think it's important, again, to help people to orient, like, what's their highest priority in this current stage? Because, again, they may not be able to articulate, like, the grand vision of their life because they may need to prepare. I mean, I was once like, a friend of mine, he really, like, now he's in his later 50s, and he's doing, like, huge level kind of facilitation and coaching. And at the early 50s, like he felt like he was at rock bottom. He'd done so much in his life. He didn't know what to do. He felt like he was wasting his life and he wasn't contributing. And he, like you asked him, and there was no way he'd done so many trainings, but he couldn't articulate his purpose at all. So, and yet, like, now the guy's on fire 5 years later. So, I really think that, like, being able to articulate it and being the embodiment of it, like, again, this is a really ultimately an important feature, but I don't think it's the first thing to have people do. I think the first thing is to have people orient to where they are in their life, and then find out their highest priorities of what they need to, like, learn, heal, and develop, and then also consider their skills. Like, I have a purpose course. I tell people to do this, and I liked in your book articulating, like, helping people to find through either the strength finders or asking some of their people closest to them, or sort of an internal process, like, what are their strengths and skills, and aligning all of these processes with their autobiographical kind of history to help them orient to, like, what's my next sort of mission.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, one more thing, like, sometimes, they can see 2 or 3 missions ahead. So sometimes they actually have to, like, be in this current job, even though that, like, there's a part of them that says, oh, this isn't ultimately what I want them to do. And so part of this is a lesson of, like, how can I be wholeheartedly, fully engaged in each sort of missionary experience of my life? It would be like saying, like, okay, in the relationship context, like, all right, I'm not going to date anybody until it's my life partner. Well, they would have been robbed of so much learning, and so, like, learning how to love and learning how to communicate and be in partnership and going through their relational development process. So I think this is, again, holding purpose as a thing robs people of, like, being fully engaged mission by mission into the like, living on purpose and being on fire in their life. Yeah.
So can you say a little bit more when you say purpose as a thing versus being fully engaged with it?
Yeah, like, so if I'm looking for purpose as this thing or this statement, and then I think, okay, once I make this statement, I can make a t-shirt and then I'm done.
Yeah, but like I have.
Right. So Right, because like you talk to people that are in the process and they say, oh yeah, wow, it has many iterations, like, oh, it continues to be an emergent process. So instead of thinking like, oh, I got to mentally find this thing, and if I just think hard enough, I can figure it out.
Okay.
And then I just put it on paper and then I'm good. No,
it's more like a concept and not a felt.
Right. So how do how do I live this in my life? So where am I currently in my life? And like, what do I need to align, like learn, develop, heal to like pass through this mission?
Yeah.
Now the triggering, can we talk about this?
Yes, please. Circumstances like trauma or exposure to teachers' internal circumstances like genetics and karma, the predicament we find ourselves in due to our development over several lives. Purpose seems to be energetic, catching on fire. Yes, that resonates with me. A devotion as more and more focus and commitment becomes single-pointed. Okay, so you were on to sharing something.
I agree with what Sally's saying, and there is also a process of helping people to continue and find the deeper inspiration and motivation when they're in transition phases or when that fire is dimmed.
Mm-hmm.
My sense is that we draw upon the work of Joseph Campbell here for the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I really like. I find that that's parallels the purpose process.
Mm-hmm. So before I read Sally's message, you said and I forgot what you said. You wanted to share something.
The triggering. Yep.
The trigger. Uh-huh.
Yeah, we're going there now.
Okay.
So we talk about there's the conventional life, or we can parallel this with sort of like biological, like human inclinations.
Mm-hmm.
So we're curious, and I think myself, Sally, and you are all curious about like what's the calling? What initiates the calling? So I'm calling triggering the call. And I think Joseph Campbell and kind of the shamanic literature talks a little bit about this. So before it happens, usually what tends to happen is there's a sensing something's more.
Mm-hmm.
The Matrix is a really good depiction of this. Like, remember Neo was sort of searching online, and he just sensed there was this something else, and then he got his call. So the call, like Sally says, can come through tragedy or trauma or exposure to teachings, exposure to books, exposure to videos. Now it can come through like an internal inner voice experience. We could say karma, and once this happens, there's still a choice. The person needs to actually sort of accept hear the call and then accept the quest. In all of the mythic heroes' journeys, there's always this choice. And for some of the heroes, like there was a little resistance, or they had to go through their internal process of kind of taking responsibility for that and claiming that life, claiming that quest, claiming the uncertainty and the mystery.
Yes.
What are your thoughts?
My thought is that I read this in other purpose guides books, is exactly that there is sort of like this, what Robert Keegan calls immunity to change. There are these self-doubts. Then, if you feel my mission is actually not to be a car mechanic, but a psychotherapist, right? And then somebody say, well, I'm too old. I cannot afford the training. I might not make a living. What will other people think? I already invested. I mean, the mind will have objection over objection over objection, right? And then people never start. And I think what I like about your process is that you don't have to then quit your job and fully jump in, but you can start on that, in that process. That's my thought when I heard you speak.
Agreed. In the purpose course that I've created, there's a section where I run people through some questions to help them find, do I need to quit my job and make the leap, or do I need to continue to cultivate my skills on the side? If I don't currently have a job, do I find something that's aligned temporarily while I'm continuing to build these skills? Again, the context of these missions and living on purpose helps to sort of quell that anxiety that it's like the quick fix, like ultimate release, and to help them kind of like relax into the process and get that there's many missions. And so how do I orient myself where I am currently?
Yes.
So once they start to, so this initial discovery phase, sensing something's more, hearing the calling, step 3, sort of accepting the quest. I'm always curious to hear people like their process, like of going through all those doubts that you described, which on one level you can look at as a beautiful process of some like obstacles to overcome. And when they finally like click in, there's a real power to that. Then the next phase starts, which is sort of the intentional development and training process. So then you'll talk to people, they'll start listening to a lot of podcasts, start reading books, going to workshops, maybe working with coaches, maybe working with body-oriented therapists. There's this process of like following their curiosity to learn and develop themselves.
And is that still part of the discovery phase? Like you have these 3 phases, right?
Yeah, I have a diagram and sort of, but once the discovery phase starts, it continues because all the way through, because even when somebody's in the delivery and like, you know, they're offering their gifts, they have a platform to do that. Like it's still often an emergent process of like, what's next and what's the next iteration, what like, oh, now this book wants to be written. So that discovery continues to be an emergent process from the very beginning. But there's a certain point in the middle there, again, in these 7 steps. The 4th is where they actually start their intentional training. And then the development stage starts, and then that continues also. So
Sally just shared the 3 phases that you shared, but now you have them broken down into 8 steps or phases, like discovery, development, delivery.
Are the 3 phases, yeah, and then I think there's also there's some stages to which I have 7 to the hero's journey, like purpose process.
Okay.
So I'm calling, I'm calling this sensing, stage 1, sensing something more. Stage 2, hearing your calling. Stage 3, accepting your quest. Stage 4, preparation and skill building. Stage 5, intentional training. Stage 6, aligning your life. Stage 7, embodying and living your purpose in the world.
And so it's at that delivery part.
Right. Yeah. And it's also like the delivery part, you know, they might find themselves in a previous mission in a situation where they're still, their skills are for delivery are being honed. But again, these 3, so there's again 3 phases of this purpose process that can go through these 7 different stages.
Yeah. And you showed me an image earlier on your cell phone. If you like, I can share this with the group after the webcast. Yes. If you can mail it to me, then I can include it in a link to the, in the email that goes out afterwards and put it on my website.
Please.
Okay. So do you want to hone in on some of these phases?
Yeah, I mean, I think let's come back to the original question of like, what trigger is it for some people and what doesn't for others? I think it's useful to use stages of development, and I think Maslow's hierarchy of needs is an important map that we can use alongside this. From his research over multiple decades, you know, he found that first we had to satisfy our deficiency needs, safety, physiological kind of needs, and then the 2 self-esteem stages before we could get to self-actualization and self-transcendence. So I think that's a useful map to this question. What are your thoughts?
I mean, even Maslow at the end of his life questioned, the hierarchy of needs, and I think it's sometimes a helpful map. So first of all, generally, I think it's a vertical integration that can happen at each levels of the spiral dynamics or Wilber vertical consciousness levels, just like as an aside. And I think that this, what we call higher purpose, or I call transcendental purpose, is something that once we awaken to it, is probably independent on, Maslow's hierarchy of needs levels. In other words, I think it can even emerge in a pure survival stage. It doesn't emerge once of course, we need to be alive, right? If we're dead, we cannot live our purpose. And I think it can emerge independent of being loved and being, to learn and self-actualize. It's just my personal thought. I'm not claiming to be absolutely right, but
I can see that in people's experiences. Yeah.
Because people could say, well, I can only live my higher purpose once I made it to the top of the hierarchy of need. When I wrote my book, that took me months to wrap my mind around it. Can you really only live your evolutionary or transcendental purpose at a higher level of consciousness, or can you live it really at every level of consciousness? I came to the conclusion that you can. It doesn't matter at what level of consciousness you are. What you contribute and how world-centric or sociocentric or egocentric it is, that's of course a different question. So that's my thought around that.
I agree. And if we consider purpose as a process instead of a thing, then it allows that congruence.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. What is your thought about what I just said about self-actualization? That you have these previous levels, sort of like aligned, which I kind of like disagree with.
We're talking semantics here. So I think if we're talking about like a transcendental purpose, then I would say that this probably tends to happen at a certain stage. But if we're talking about a unique purpose, then I think this can, this as a process can happen at any stage of development.
Okay. Yeah, that's where we come into these interesting distinctions, right? Where I think I went a little bit into showing, how different levels use different words.
Right.
I'm just going to bring up that slide real quick, if you don't mind. Because that may be interesting to some people. That we have universe's purpose, authentic purpose, evolutionary purpose, soul's purpose, real true purpose, higher God's purpose, unique purpose, spirit's purpose, and I'm personally curious. We don't have to go into that. Why did different people coin these different terms for purpose? And I think it all leads to the same source, right? When people use the word God, but then, there seem to be different philosophies and different discovery methods and different delivery methods and philosophies behind some of these different thoughts. There was a few years ago this big conversation between Andrew Cohen and Mark Gaffney between authentic purpose and unique purpose and what the difference may be, for example. I'll stop that again.
Yeah, I remember that.
So I think when people resonate with Maslow's hierarchy of needs and a transcendental purpose, or what Maslow called self-actualization, that, as you just said, that may point to one way of embodying or experiencing purpose, and maybe also the strength of the calling, and maybe how altruistic it is, and so on and so forth.
Right.
While other people may have a different experience of purpose and then give it a different name.
Totally. Because I can be at a fundamentalist level and be living my unique purpose in the world in my, my kind of religious community. So I agree with you in terms of that. But in terms of that we're at a transcendent stage of ego development, and then
Yes.
like how our worldview and like the sense of self, like that's a different conversation.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I read Rick Warren's book. I forgot now what the title is, but it
Purpose-driven life or something.
The Purpose-Driven Life, yeah. And actually, I found it interesting in parts. I was really curious what he would say. And of course, in large parts, it's just like you have to live God's purpose. And now I, Rick Warren, tell you what God's purpose is and what God thinks about what your purpose is.
Yeah.
So, but this book sold, I think, over 16 million copies. I mean, way more than The Power of Now or any other book on purpose.
Which I think it speaks to like the universal human like inclination to like, you know, like discover this unique contribution to the world and be like a greater and greater iteration of myself. I think it's well, I want to say I really appreciated your distinctions on creationism, evolution, and sort of intelligent design. And there's a really elegant appreciation from an integral perspective of the way that there's a partial truth in everything, and that we can kind of read any book or perspective and like see the partial truth in it and how it all fits together and contributes something positive and how it's come out of a previous more limited perspective. So, yeah.
So when you coach clients, to come back to your work, do you have sort of like somewhat, I don't mean it in a negative way, kind of cookie cutter approach, or do you feel like you adjust to, you know, somebody deeply religious, you know, comes to you and says, I want to live God's calling or God's purpose, or somebody come more from like the strength finder, right? More a very orange rational approach, or more from a soul's, you know, I want to discover what my soul's purpose is.
I have all three of those kind of clients right now.
Okay. And how do you differently approach it then?
Well, if you're familiar with spiral dynamics, there's the kind of encouragement to be a spiral wizard and to really get somebody's world and speak to them kind of in a language that resonates for them. My training was in integral coaching through Integral Coaching Canada. So on the back end, we have a really cool map of human development stages and states and personality types and gender types and multiple intelligences. So somebody will come to me and then they'll have really practical objectives that they want to actualize in their life. So we'll establish 4 or 5 different goals over the next 3 months that we're going to help them kind of actualize in their life. Organizationally, it might be, you know, productivity prioritization. It might be effective communication with their support, you know, their peers, colleagues. It might be, you know, increasing their like rapport in sales conversations. It could be executive presence. So then we're gonna so on the back end, I'm using the developmental map, but they don't need to know that. So we're helping them build those practical skills. But then with the integral map, then we're also helping to look at which intelligences are we can leverage, and or which can we kind of build a little bit. If we're working with a couple, and they want to improve, I work with work, love, and life. So if I'm working with a couple, you know, and they want to improve their perspective taking and empathy, if they want to improve their felt sense of heart connection, if they want to improve their sexual polarity, and if they want to improve their communication and conflict, then we're going to take a metric of where are their particular skills on a scale of 0 to 10. So we get that gauge before we start. And then when we're done working, then we can see, hey, this was a 3 out of 10, and now it's an 8 out of 10. So again, on the back end, we're able to look at what's their emotional intelligence, what's their interpersonal intelligence, what's their somatic intelligence, and let's give specific practices to help develop these skills. So on the front end, they get to achieve these objectives, and their subjective experience is wow, we're so much happier. We're functioning so much smoothly together. Our sex life is better than ever. Wow, we don't have as many fights and we recover quickly. So that's sort of how we're using an integral perspective from Integral Coaching Canada to help people build skills and then actualize certain developmental objectives. It's really, for me, it's really elegant.
Yeah. That's always this thing once you get a hang of integral theory, right? You're just how can people go through life without taking that approach to their own life and helping others? But of course, we know it's only a small percentage.
Can I say one other thing?
Of course.
And I think stage development parallels purpose, the purpose thing, because, and I remember them really, Joanne and Laura, the heads of Integral Coaching, I went through this in 2010 through 12, they really emphasized like, don't just try to reach their stage. Like, don't just try to develop somebody, because we have all of the lines of intelligences and we want to translate like healthy development through all the stages. So focus on helping people actualize their objectives and let the evolutionary impulse of life like sort of guide them through the stages of development. And I think the same thing is true with the purpose process, that, I think sometimes there's this anxiety, like, well, just help me write the purpose statement down, and because that's such an emergent process. Like we need to live the current mission that we're in fully, learn the skills that I need to learn the life lessons, and help learn the skill of how do I find my next mission? How do I find my direction in times of transition? I think the two hardest things of the purpose process are to have the context that I'm in this process instead of just looking for a thing, and to live each mission fully. That's one. And I think the second thing is, how do I find my direction again and again in periods of transition and from one mission to the next?
Our friend Eloy shares, it seems like higher level would allow for more resources and capacities.
Eloy from San Diego, how you doing, man?
Yeah.
He's a good dude.
Eloy is always happy and positive. I never met him in another way. Yeah.
He does so much here in our local integral community in San Diego.
Yes,
Thank you.
He's a real saint.
I agree, Eloy. Yeah, the more, I forget how Suzanne Cook-Greder holds it, but with each stage comes more skill, more capacity, more adaptability, more ability to work with complexity.
And also to consider more of the past and the future. So your event horizons, or your horizon recedes further and further. That I thought is a real important thing in manifesting purpose. And when I write now and think, I always kind of like start from the Big Bang and look at how did we get to this moment, and how does our behavior and action and what we enact right now as individuals and as a humanity, how will that be viewed in 100 years, in 1,000 years, in 10,000 years? But if I would have one wish freeze that I could come back, every 10 years just for one day to see how things have evolved, because, the future, as David Bohm said, predictions are really hard, specifically about the future.
I remember taking a Western history class as an elective in college. And I remember there was the awareness of like, wow, that was 100 years. And then that was like a page in a book. So I just read this. There was a poem that was kind of an inspired poem that I wrote called To the Mystics and Wayshowers. And similar to you, like from the Big Bang, there's this, like I was touching into this like deep appreciation for our humanity and deep compassion for, so many saints and sages and women and people of all races and cultures, and healers and witches and sages who, were killed, tortured, persecuted, who had to practice in hiding. I get the chills talking about it, that lost their lives, devoted their lives to the healing, development, evolution, and awakening of humanity. And there's this like sacred quality of us, like really standing on the shoulders of giants, that all those grooves that have been worn before us, that we can kind of take up the torch and continue lighting the way for generations to come.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. This is very. I have this little cartoon with Gandhi and Martin Luther King. And Gandhi says to King, or one says to the other, says, the funny thing about assassins is that they thought they can kill us.
Apparently Gandhi used to say a mantra of Ram, which is apparently God. And so he was saying God, apparently in the moment he was shot.
Yeah, well, we just watched the movie Gandhi, and that's at least in the movie he says, "Oh God."
Yeah.
It collapses.
Yeah.
So,
I think the way that we like, there's a quality of practicing on the cushion and practicing in the dojo or the yoga studio, but it's like, as life brings us these tests, I'm more and more aware of the moments of frustration or the moments of challenge are the real tests from life.
Yeah.
I had this.
So,
go ahead.
Go ahead, please. You're the guest. You get to go.
Well, let's fill into what wants to emerge.
Yeah. So I just watched a wonderful video that you have, I think, on your Facebook page about men and women. And I think, what's the message from the man's side? Be present.
It's a poem called She Wants to Feel You.
She wants to feel you, yes.
She wants to feel you, man.
Mm-hmm.
And she is in all capitals. And it starts off with, I got a bunch of my friends together and we filmed it in the last couple of weeks, but all these different kind of qualities that the masculine can embody. And if we can draw upon your anima stage development complex, I think, in stage 4, according to your work, the masculine, as he's, or no, the masculine. So that woman as inspiration, muse, to spirituality, creativity, development.
Yeah.
So, I think in that developmental masculinity process, there's a process by which, it might start off with criticizing or nagging, but I think often underneath there's the real pure inspiration to really want the masculine to grow and be his greatest self. I think if you ask women, they'll say that it's almost a primal inclination to have their man, live his fullness, penetrate her and life with the most love and clarity possible. And so oftentimes in that process, guys will say they have this one girlfriend or one relationship where their wife really inspires them to be their best self, or that often is the beginning of the process. But I think ultimately he needs to find that, connect with that evolutionary impulse to evolve, to serve and to awaken within himself, independent of others. And so while they might, add kindling to the fire and the flame initially, the video is really about that initial process of women women or coaches or parents or mentors or books or teachers, inspiring them to grow and be their best self. And then until eventually they realize it was all the great muse herself. It was the evolutionary process of life that has been beckoning them to grow and develop and heal and open and evolve and serve and give their greatness a life.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's wonderful and important, I think, to understand. And so that was moving from Gandhi, and earlier I thought about it. Obviously I wrote my second book, Sex, Purpose, Love, after I had this deep yearning and calling to share my purpose with a woman as an equal and opposite partner. Mm-hmm. And that emerged when listening to Brian Wetton, who's an amazing coach's coach, so to speak, selling by giving. I love his work. And he described the syndrome that I also experienced and other people have experienced, is that, there's what you call delivery, providing our service, what we love to do. And then, as you know, many helping professionals are not really making a living. They have a hard time finding clients, or they just don't like the marketing part. And what I experienced, since I also like the marketing part, is more this conflict. When I do the marketing, I felt I should deliver more. And when I was delivering, I thought, I need to market myself. And then I didn't do neither. And a lot of people nodded when they said, oh, yeah, that's exactly what I do, right? And on Facebook, I go to the refrigerator. And then I realized a day later, that's a problem with feminine masculine polarities. And since you cannot embody both at the same time. In my theory, if you co-create with a partner, right, then maybe one person works more on the delivery, the other person more on the marketing and selling side, and more the infrastructure or whatever is necessary.
Yeah.
And you showed couples in that video, and I had some of these co-creative couples, and then Gandhi and his wife, for example, where she said, if you put him in jail, I'm going to speak, right? That they had sort of like
super inspiring.
She was just like following him, but it felt very authentic that she had made that they had so like this shared purpose. And of course, there's many powerful couples. So do you see a difference between people individually pursuing their purpose, and that it may even have a negative effect on their relationships, where one partner may see living their purpose is more important than the relationship? Or do you see also couples who really share the same purpose and become these super power couples or whatever, like Bill and Melinda Gates, and there's many other, Eckhart Tolle and Kim Eng and so on and so forth, who really work together?
Yeah, I think it's both.
Do you have any thoughts about this little sermon that I just gave, and experiences around that?
Yeah, I think it's both. I mean, again, like I always try to apply the theory and then look in the world and with my clients how, like, what matches and what doesn't. Mm-hmm. What I find is, again, some people, like, their life purpose is a more internal process the whole way. And some people have a more external process. Even for somebody who has an internal, like, yes, of course, they're still to be loving and kind and be of service in the way that they can. But their purpose itself may be a more internal process, and other people may have a more external, public, like outward facing. So we can't judge ourselves what is what, because in another life it might be different. And then the same thing with couples. Like there are many really powerful couples that it seems like almost like their final, like their purpose kind of clicked in, and it's sort of like they both feed off each other. But then, I know many couples also that their purpose is individually, but then they come together, and in the morning at night, like, I love your images of the different ways that the chakras align. And then, I think from this perspective, like the love relationship is the activator. I mean, it's really nourishing and to savor and to enjoy on the personal human level, but on the service instrument of service level, that our relationship and the way we make love even is to activate and open our systems so we can be more open, loving, empowered instruments of service. Mm-hmm. Even if those are individually, those are individual.
Yeah. Have you experienced that in a relationship, or do you experience that in a relationship with a woman that you become co-creators, but because there's a certain alignment of your vision and? Yeah,
I mean, a couple of my longer term relationships that we've done a couple of events together, but still, but like our purposes themselves were like, they were complementary, but they were not shared.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Again, like I think it's both. I think some people, like, their purpose is actually to meet this partner and then do stuff together. And then I think other people have individual purposes, but that has nothing to do with the strength of their bond and connection.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I want to just set that like context that I think like that making love is for our own bonding and pleasure, and also for activating our systems for, like, in that way, it's a spiritual practice for our own development, but also for the activation of our life force and the openness of our channels and systems to be instruments of service. There's a real sacred, there's a real sacredness to it, like this.
Mm-hmm. Wow, this hour went by like... I felt so alone for a while in LA when I was still in LA, and that's one reason why I started these web jams. It's just to connect with people like you and to have these kind of conversations.
So rich.
Now I'm a little bit more engaged in my life, but I'm so grateful for you sharing with us and for being available, and also giving me the pleasure of just riffing off on all of these different aspects, and I'm always learning so much. Specifically, I realize how much I'm sort of like a theorist, reading books and writing books and teaching other people sort of like, and as you said, my workshops and trainings are very embodied, and I'm very much about embodiment, but I'm not a certified coach or psychotherapist or anything, right? And it's so great to talk with practitioners like you who do this day in and day out, really with people, and there's just like a different flavor to it, and I think it complements very well.
Compliments.
Like reading my book, for example, and getting more of the maps, right? And
Martin,
Martin,
thank you.
Really deliver it. I don't, right? I just deliver the book.
Martin,
it becomes then.
And I think to tie in purpose, it's like we're all in this together, and it's like cheering others on when we sense that they're kind of living on purpose. Because, like Martin, with the most profound gratitude, that first book, I've read it twice, and I've showed it to countless clients, like some of your maps and some of your models for gender development, and just the clarity and the relaxation, that makes so much sense. So thank you for living your unique purpose in the world and making the maps for coaches and people like us that are the bridges and the translators and the healers and the activators for. I coach real people, so it's really useful in their lives. So thank you.
Thank you so much for saying that.
Yeah.
Well, I love you very much, Johnny, and I'm excited that we finally got to do that. And I don't know why I totally spaced it. You were in this first training. There's this image of David. You remember David and
Buddha,
his later wife, who I actually married. I had the honor today, asked me to marry them.
Oh, wow. Paula.
And then, of course, David. Now I don't remember her name. I'm red-faced.
David.
Anyway,
Paula.
but David passed away 2 years ago. He had a very traumatic accident, and whenever I think back to that training, of course, I think of them. So anyway, I don't want to end this on a sad note, but it was
real pleasure.
Also great to think back to this first training in LA, and you reminding me. Mm-hmm. All right, hopefully we'll bump into each other again somewhere on the planet sometime.
Till then, Martin, thank you.
Yeah, have a great weekend, and thanks for your work, Johnny.
You as well.
And thank you everyone who watched us. So this was our penultimate weekly web jam, and next week we have our last one that's happening every week with Bill Epperly from Chicago about awakened state of being and relationships. So awakening and be awakened beings in relationships. So that will be a nice conclusion. Then we will continue maybe once a month or so when we have other interesting guests, and maybe some of the previous guests back, like you, on another web jam. Okay, wherever you are in the world, thank you for watching and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.